People have asked me what the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is. And there are a few things that rise to the top of the list. But one thing was incredibly difficult for me to do. And that was the day that I packed a few boxes of clothes in my car and drove to Los Angeles, California from Memphis, Tennessee. I left my family. I left my friends. I had lived in Memphis for 25 plus years. So I had deep roots there. My whole life was there. I had a job with salary, benefits, and I was actually in a relationship. My dad was in the last year of his life. His battle with cancer was drawing to an end. So it was very difficult for me to move to California. And honestly, I wouldn't have done it except I knew that that was where I was supposed to be. I'd had for a long time a feeling in my gut that I had to move to Los Angeles. And that was the only thing that made me do it because I hated it. I cried quite a bit of the 2-day drive out here. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no house. I had no prospects for a job or a life. It was a culture shock coming from the South to the West Coast. It was something I was unbelievably ill prepared for. And I was miserable for the first 3 to 6 months. It was very, very difficult for me. And the drive itself, the fact of just putting things in the car and the finality of quitting my job and driving across the country to go and do something that I wasn't even quite sure what was, but I knew I had to do, was extremely difficult. And when someone asked me this question the other day about the hardest thing I'd ever done, it got me thinking, you know, there comes a time in everyone's life, or sometimes several times, when you have to take a chance. You have to risk everything sometimes. It's easy to get comfortable and to grow deep roots and to kind of go along status quo, not really trying anything. But most of us have a dream. Most of us have a passion, an idea. It may not be moving across the country. It may not be writing a book like it was for me. It may be starting a business, or it may be starting a relationship, or it may be starting a new job, or it may be moving across the country. And at a certain point, we can prepare as much as we want to for this moment when we're going to risk everything in our life. And it's like being on the edge of a cliff. And you kind of talk yourself into getting ready to jump off the cliff. And you can stand there and you can prepare and you can check your parachute and you can test the wind and the angles. But at a certain point, you just have to jump. For me, at a certain point, I just had to put stuff in the back of the truck and I had to start driving. And you may fail. I've failed many, many times. I'm still not quite sure 8 years later that I know what I'm doing in California. But sometimes you just have to take that risk because you can go your whole life and be too afraid to risk, to be so scared that you're going to fail that you never try it. But I just think that it would be way better to get to the end of your life and look back and have to admit that you failed. It would be way better to admit that you failed than to have to look back and admit that you're too afraid to try. To me, you can prepare, but at a certain point, you got to jump off the cliff. And whatever that is in your life, get all your stuff in order, pack your parachute, but at a certain point, just close your eyes and jump. You may crash, you may fall. To be honest, you probably will. I do all the time. But it would be better to do that than to live and die with that dream, with that idea, with that goal in your heart and never try it.